The glow from the television screen cast long shadows across Dale's living room. He sat on the worn floral couch, a glass of amber liquid in his hand, Sharon beside him. Across the coffee table, Frank and Carol occupied the recliner and a matching armchair, their faces illuminated by the shifting images of the movie. Same time next year was nearing its end, another annual rendezvous for the film's star-crossed lovers. Dale had always found the premise ridiculous, a fantasy for people who couldn't face their own lives. Nonsense, Dale stated, his voice cutting through the soft murmur of the film score. He took a slow swallow of his drink. Absolute nonsense. People who carry on like that, they ought to be shot. Carol, a woman who always wore her heart on her sleeve, turned from the screen, her expression already softening with disagreement. Dale, that's harsh. It's true love they found. Fate, maybe. Her voice had a wistful quality to it. Dale snorted, dismissing her sentiment with a wave of his hand. True love doesn't mean you cheat on your spouse, Carol. That's called being a coward and a liar. Sharon shifted beside him, the springs in the couch groaning under her weight. Her eyes, usually calm, now held a sharp, dangerous glint. Is that what you thought when Brenda ran off with Todd, Dale? That she was a coward and a liar? The name hung in the air, heavy and unwelcome, a ghost between them. Dale's jaw tightened. He hadn't expected Sharon to drag Brenda into this. Not tonight, not in front of Frank and Carol. He met her gaze, his own hardening. And what about Matt, Sharon? Was he a coward and a liar too, or just a mistake you made before you knew better? A silence descended, thicker than the summer humidity outside. Frank, usually quick with a joke, cleared his throat, his eyes darting between Dale and Sharon. Now, hold on, guys. It's just a movie, right? No need to get all worked up. But Dale wasn't finished. He turned to Frank, his voice even, almost conversational, belying the edge in his eyes. Tell me, Frank, what would you do if Carol had some true love on the side? Meeting once a year, all secret and romantic-like. Frank's smile faltered. He looked at Carol, then back at Dale, a flush rising on his neck. Carol would never do that, Dale. Not in a million years. We're solid. His hand went to Carol's knee, a gesture of reassurance that seemed more for himself than for her. As Frank spoke, Dale noticed something. A flicker. A tiny, almost imperceptible exchange between Sharon and Carol. A glance that lasted less than a second, an unreadable flash in their eyes before they both looked away. It was gone as quickly as it appeared, but it left a cold knot forming in Dale's stomach, a chill that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. Carol, perhaps sensing the shift, leaned over and kissed Frank's cheek, a bright, performative gesture. See? He knows me. Sharon, meanwhile, kept her gaze fixed on the now dark television screen, pointedly avoiding Dale's eyes. The movie was turned off. The VCR whirred its final protest before clicking silent. The room felt strangely empty without the background noise. How about a game of euchre? Carol suggested, her voice a little too bright. They moved to the kitchen table, but the lingering tension remained, a phantom guest at their friendly gathering. Dale picked up the deck of cards, the smooth plastic feeling cool against his fingertips. His mind, however, had already drifted, pulled back by Sharon's sharp words, by the name Brenda. The resentment was a dull ache he had carried for years, a wound that never quite healed. He'd been so young when he enlisted, barely out of high school, convinced he and Brenda were forever. Then the letter stopped. The one that finally came wasn't from her, but from his mother, a single devastating paragraph. Brenda, she wrote, had gone to prom with Todd Anderson, not him. And she was pregnant. He remembered the red haze that had descended, the way his hands had shaken as he scribbled a furious, hateful letter back to her, telling her he never wanted to see or hear from her again. He had cut her out, clean. She married Todd a few months later. In the humid jungles of Vietnam, the news had hardened him, made him reckless. He walked into firefights expecting a body bag, half hoping for one. It would be an end to the ache, a final statement. But fate, or whatever it was, had other plans. He came home, not in a box but a decorated hero, his chest heavy with medals he didn't feel he deserved. And at his welcome home party, in the community hall filled with well-wishers and fake smiles, there she was, Brenda, beside Todd, holding a baby, a little girl named Sarah, the proof of his replacement, of her betrayal staring back at him from her mother's arms. The community hall hummed with forced cheer, the scent of casserole and cheap punch thick in the air. Dale stood near the back, his uniform feeling stiff, the bronze star pinned to his chest a heavy, unfamiliar weight. Faces he hadn't seen in years, some familiar, some vaguely so, kept passing by, offering handshakes and platitudes. "Glad you're home, son. Proud of your service." Each word felt hollow, echoing the emptiness inside him. He saw Brenda again, across the room, smiling up at Todd, her baby, Sarah, in a frilly dress, sleeping soundly in the stroller beside them. A bitter taste filled his mouth. He felt a deep, cold ache that was part sadness, part venomous hate. He didn't belong here, not really. This wasn't his life anymore. He saw Sharon Davies near the punch bowl, a quiet girl he'd known from high school. She'd been the kind of pretty, smart girl he never thought he had a shot with, always busy with yearbook club or some academic thing. Back then, she'd been out of his league, dating Matt Harrison, the star quarterback. Now she looked a little lost, standing by herself. On impulse, fueled by a desire to escape the suffocating niceties in Brenda's presence, Dale walked over. "Dance, Sharon?" he asked, his voice rougher than he intended. She looked surprised. Then a small, hesitant smile touched her lips. "Sure, Dale." They shuffled around the makeshift dance floor to the slow strum of a local band. Neither of them was much of a dancer. After a moment, she spoke, her voice soft. "It's good you're back, Dale. Everyone's really proud." He grunted, the words feeling like ash. "Yeah, well," he paused, then, "heard about you and Matt." It wasn't polite, but honesty felt better than pretending. Her shoulders slumped, almost imperceptibly. "He went off to college, found someone new. Guess I wasn't enough." The quiet pain in her voice was unmistakable. A strange kind of understanding settled between them. Two people recently discarded found themselves dancing. "Sounds familiar?" Dale said, a wry edge to his tone. He didn't elaborate, didn't need to. She knew about Brenda. Everyone did. From that night, a tentative connection began. They started dating, moving slow, careful. There was no grand passion, no fireworks, just a shared quiet understanding. They both knew what it felt like to be left, to fill a hole where certainty used to be. That common ground, that shared sense of being dumped, became the foundation of their early weeks together. They understood each other's wounded pride in a way no one else seemed to. 6 months later, they found an apartment. Then, another 3 months after that, they got married in a small ceremony at the courthouse. It felt right, a practical step. Not love in the storybook sense, but companionship. A steady presence, a way to chase away the deep loneliness that had settled in after Brenda. Dale started his electrician apprenticeship, learning the trade, finding satisfaction in tangible work. Sharon continued at the travel agency, arranging trips for people who dreamt of getting away. Their marriage surprisingly worked. It was built on mutual respect, a shared appreciation for quiet evenings, and a surprisingly good intimacy that wasn't about grand gestures but about comfort and honesty. They talked about things not always deep, but always real. One night, Dale, curious, asked her about her experiences before him. Sharon didn't blush or deflect. Instead, she just got up, went to her dresser, and came back with a stack of women's magazines. "Most girls learn from these," she said, her voice factual. "They teach you things, mostly about what men like." He just nodded, taking it in. It was practical, unromantic, and utterly Sharon. He often thought about it. They didn't have the fiery passion he'd read about or seen in movies, but they had something else. A quiet contentment, a steady rhythm. Their relationship, he figured, was better than a lot of the marriages he saw around them, built on less pretense, more reality. A few weeks ago, Sharon had brought up the travel agency convention. "It's in Florida this year, Dale. They even allow spouses to come along. We could make a trip out of it." Dale had shaken his head. "Don't know, honey. Using my vacation time for your work meetings doesn't sound like much of a vacation to me." He preferred fishing or maybe a quiet cabin up north, not bustling hotels and business dinners. Carol, who was sitting across from them, had piped up immediately. "Oh, Sharon, I'll go with you. Frank won't want to go either. He hates all that convention stuff." Her eagerness had been palpable, almost like she was waiting for the opportunity. Dale had just chuckled, taking a sip of his beer. "Well, you two have a good time. I'll just be here getting excited for your return." It was an old joke one his father used to make. Now, as the conversation around the card table settled, Sharon and Carol stood up together. "Restroom," Sharon mumbled, and they walked off, their steps in sync, just as Dale had observed them earlier. The quiet understanding, the shared space between them, was clear. When Sharon returned from the Florida convention, she carried a subtle glow, a vitality Dale hadn't noticed in her before. Her skin had a faint tan, and her eyes seemed brighter, holding a new, almost mischievous spark. That night, their intimacy was more passionate, more urgent than it had been in a long time. It felt good, a renewed connection after her week away. A few weeks later, Sharon told him she was pregnant. Dale was overjoyed. He saw it as a sign, a fresh start. Annie, he decided, would be the anchor, the little person who would finally solidify their family, filling any lingering emptiness. Baby Annie arrived in early February, a small pink bundle of squalling life, just in time for Valentine's Day. Dale held her, felt the incredible lightness of her in his arms, and a fierce, protective love surged through him. She was his pride and joy, a tangible future, a reason to work harder, to build a better life. Sharon took 3 months off from the travel agency, and his sister Beth came by often to help out, holding Annie, cooing over her tiny fingers and toes. Even with Annie's arrival, the old ghost never fully vanished. Sometimes, during a disagreement, a sharp word about Brenda or Matt would slip out, a brief, unwelcome reminder of the raw nerves that still existed between them. They were quick to apologize, to pull back, but the echoes were there. One afternoon, Beth was over, rocking Annie in the living room. Dale was fixing a loose wire on a lamp. He looked up, a thought nudging at him. "Hey, Beth," he said casually, "you ever see Brenda around?" He hadn't asked about her in years, but the conversation with Sharon and Carol had stirred something up. Beth paused her rocking. "Oh, sure. Saw her at Kroger just last week. She was with her little girl." Dale felt a strange pang. "Sarah?" he asked, the name coming unbidden, the one he'd always associated with Brenda's baby. Beth shook her head gently. "No, Dale. Her name's Andrea. She has the cutest little pigtails." Beth smiled, a soft, fond look on her face. "Andrea, a real cutie." Andrea. So that was it. Not Sarah. Not the name he'd privately assigned to the child of Brenda's betrayal. It was a small detail, but it lodged itself in his mind. He just grunted, turning back to the lamp. "Still can't believe she named her that," he mumbled, though he didn't really care. The bitterness was a familiar blanket, cold but comforting in its consistency. He had built a life on forgetting Brenda, on moving past that particular humiliation. But then, as the weeks turned into months, something else began to nag at him. Subtle changes in Sharon. A new kind of restlessness. She'd always been steady, reliable, but now he saw moments of distraction, a far-off look in her eyes. She'd hum unfamiliar tunes around the house, songs he hadn't heard on the radio. Her phone seemed to be always close, and she'd often take it with her when she went to the bathroom, something she'd never done before. He remembered the flash between Sharon and Carol, that quick, unreadable exchange in their eyes during the movie night. He dismissed it then, focused on Frank's discomfort, but now it pricked at him, a tiny thorn of unease. He pushed it down. It was probably just new motherhood, the adjustment. Annie was a lot of work, and Sharon had gone back to the travel agency after her 3 months leave. They were both tired. He focused on Annie, on the way she gurgled when he tickled her chin, on the steady hum of his work, installing new wiring, fixing old circuits. These were concrete things. These were real. Another year, another convention. Sharon brought it up over dinner one Tuesday evening. "The agency is sending me to Colorado this year, Dale, for the big industry conference. You know, if you wanted to come along." Her voice trailed off, a hint of expectation in her tone. Dale shook his head before she even finished. "Colorado? For a convention? No thanks, honey. All those stuffy meetings and forced smiles. I'd rather spend my vacation time actually taking a vacation. You know?" He still preferred the idea of a quiet fishing trip or working on his old pickup truck. Before Dale could even finish his sentence, Carol, who was over for their usual card night, jumped in. Oh, Sharon, I'll go with you again. Frank hates that kind of thing. He'd just be bored. Her enthusiasm was almost too quick, a reflex. It made Dale wonder, not for the first time, why Frank never went to these things. Later that week, Dale found himself talking to Frank while they were helping each other rotate tires on Frank's Buick. Carol sure gets a kick out of those travel agency conventions, Dale remarked, wiping grease from his hands with a rag. Always so eager to go. Guess it's a good break for her, huh? You never seem to go. Frank grunted, tightening a lug nut. Nah, man, that's boring stuff. All hotel ballrooms and bad coffee. Plus, I'm swamped at the plant, you know? Supervisor duties don't end just because there's a convention. Wouldn't waste a vacation day on that. He shrugged, dismissing the topic. Dale let it go, but the thought lingered. As Sharon and Carol packed their bags for Colorado, Dale watched them, a quiet sense of foreboding settling in his chest. They moved with an easy familiarity, sharing jokes, packing similar, small suitcases. It wasn't overt, nothing he could point to, but the air around them seemed different, charged with a subtle energy. The week Sharon was away felt long and strangely empty. He missed her, of course, missed her presence in the house, the quiet rhythm of their evenings. But beneath the loneliness, a prickly apprehension began to grow. When Sharon called, her stories about the convention seemed a little too rehearsed, a little too perfect. She'd describe a speaker, a workshop, then quickly shift the topic to Annie, asking about her day, about him. Little inconsistencies, a detail about a restaurant she mentioned that didn't quite line up with a later description, started to accumulate. A few days after she returned, while tidying up her travel bag she'd left on the bed, Dale found it. Tucked beneath a stack of industry pamphlets was a receipt, a small, crumpled piece of paper from the Aspen Leaf, a high-end restaurant he knew was near the convention hotel in Colorado Springs. The date was right, midweek of the convention. And the total? It was for 2 full meals, not a group dinner or an expense account lunch, just 2. Then, at the bottom of the bomb, wrapped in tissue paper, was a delicate silver bracelet. It wasn't fancy, but it was clearly expensive. Not the kind of cheap trinket a convention hands out as a souvenir. A cold, hard knot formed in the pit of Dale's stomach. The memory of the same time next year discussion, the flash he'd seen between Sharon and Carol, hit him with a fresh wave of dread. He tried to push it away to rationalize. Maybe the receipt was an innocent mistake. Maybe Carol had taken her out for a nice dinner. Maybe the bracelet was just a gift from a grateful client. Paranoia, he told himself, just old wounds talking. Brenda, Matt, his past betrayals were twisting everything, making him see things that weren't there. He was projecting. Still, the thought gnawed at him. He couldn't shake it. He needed more information, something to either confirm or completely dismiss his swirling suspicions. He decided to try a different approach. The next time Beth came over to watch Annie, Dale brought up the subject as casually as he could manage. So, Sharon just got back from Colorado, he started, pretending to be distracted by Annie playing on the floor. Carol went with her again. She really seems to like those trips. Beth nodded, smiling. Oh, Carol? She loves to get away. Says it's good for her, lets her blow off some steam. Frank, you know, he's such a homebody. Beth paused, then added, she always comes back with a spring in her step, that one. Like she's had a real good time. Dale just nodded, his mind working, the pieces of the puzzle starting to feel sharper, colder. When Sharon returned from Colorado, the change in her was more pronounced than after Florida. She wasn't just tanned. There was a vivacity, a restless energy that hummed beneath her skin. Her laugh was a little louder, her movements a little quicker. But with this new vibrancy came a subtle distance, a feeling that she was holding something back, a secret. Her eyes, though bright, seemed to contain a new, unreadable depth. Dale watched her, a knot of unease tightening in his chest. His suspicions, which he had tried to dismiss as paranoia, now felt colder, more solid. He waited, picking his moment. A few days later, while Sharon was out grocery shopping, Dale went through her desk drawer. He hated himself for it, the invasive feeling of it, but the unease was too great to ignore. Hidden beneath a pile of old travel brochures, he found it, a credit card statement he hadn't seen before. This card, he knew, was for her personal expenses, not connected to their joint account. His hands trembled slightly as he unfolded it. The charges jumped out at him, stark and undeniable. A second charge from the Aspen Leaf restaurant, the same high-end place he'd found the receipt for, not for two, but for two. Another charge, even more damning, was for a two-night stay at a charming bed and breakfast just outside of Colorado Springs. Dated for the weekend immediately following the convention. 2 nights for 2 people. He sat at the desk, the paper crinkling in his hands. Dale pulled out the convention itinerary Sharon had left on the fridge. He cross-referenced the dates, the locations. The B&B stay overlapped directly with the days she had claimed were wrap-up meetings and networking events. His mind replayed her slightly too perfect stories, her vague answers. The pieces, once scattered, now clicked into place with a horrifying precision. This wasn't a work trip. This was a private excursion. The pit in his stomach deepened, cold and heavy. This wasn't some minor oversight. This was intentional. This was a lie. That evening, after Annie was asleep and the house was quiet, Dale laid the credit card statement on the kitchen table. Sharon walked in, humming softly, a faint smile on her face. She saw the paper, then saw his face. The smile vanished. "What's this, Dale?" she asked, her voice losing its lightness. "You tell me," he said, pushing the statement towards her. His voice was flat, devoid of emotion, a cold, hard realism. 2 nights at a B&B, dinner for 2 at a fancy restaurant. All for a convention, Sharon? She picked up the statement, her eyes scanning the lines. Her face flushed, then went pale. Those were work expenses," she stammered, avoiding his gaze. "Group outings. The agency sometimes covers things like that for team building." "Group outing?" Dale's voice remained calm, but the ice in it was unmistakable. "Says dinner for 2 right here, and a romantic weekend package. Is that how the travel agency does team building now? Romantic dinners for 2? For you and Carol, maybe?" Sharon's eyes snapped up, blazing with a sudden fierce anger. "You went through my things? You don't trust me, Dale? After everything we've built?" She threw the statement back on the table. "This is just like you, always suspicious. You're still hung up on Brenda, aren't you? Can't get over her, so you pick apart every little thing I do." "This has nothing to do with Brenda," Dale stated, his gaze unyielding. "This has to do with what's on this paper. This has to do with you. The evidence is right here, Sharon. It's clear." He leaned forward, his voice dropping to a low, dangerous whisper. "Were you with someone else?" The anger drained from her face, replaced by a terrible vulnerability. Her chin began to tremble. Her eyes filled, and then, slowly, silently, tears began to track paths down her cheeks. The silence in the kitchen stretched, thick and suffocating. You're listening to a story where every choice has a consequence. Stick around to the end to see how life's costly choices unfold. Sharon's tears were quiet, almost silent, tracking down her face as she looked at Dale. The anger had evaporated, leaving behind a raw, desperate vulnerability. She wiped her nose with the back of her hand, then finally spoke, her voice a thin whisper. "Yes," she confessed, her gaze fixed on the table between them. "Yes, I was with someone else, both times. Florida and Colorado." The word hung in the air, heavy and solid. Dale felt a sickening lurch in his gut. He had suspected, he had feared, but hearing her say it, was like a punch to the chest. The air left his lungs in a ragged gasp. He gripped the edge of the kitchen table, knuckles white. "Who?" he managed. The single word a guttural sound, his voice barely audible. He dreaded the answer, every fiber of his being resisting it, yet needing to hear it. Sharon squeezed her eyes shut, a fresh wave of tears escaping. When she opened them, they were full of a terrible, quiet misery. "Frank," she said, the name barely a breath. It was Frank. The world seemed to tilt, not just Sharon, but Frank. Frank, his friend, the man whose tires he had helped change, the one who sat across from him at card nights, drinking his beer, laughing at his jokes. Frank, Carol's husband, Annie's godfather. The betrayal was a cold, sharp blade twisting deeper than Brenda's ever had. This wasn't just a wife leaving. This was a friend, someone he trusted, someone in their inner circle, systematically lying to his face, invading his home. Sharon continued, her words tumbling out, laced with a strange mix of remorse and self-justification. It started in Florida. I, I felt so alone, Dale, so unloved. You were always so busy with work. With Annie, I know she's our daughter, but sometimes I felt like I was just another thing to manage. Frank, he listened. He paid attention. He made me feel seen. He heard her, but the words felt distant, muffled by the roaring in his ears. Attentive, understanding. These were things he thought they had, or at least a practical version of them. He had been so sure of their foundation, built on quiet respect and shared experiences. He remembered their talks after their own heartbreaks, the slow, steady build of their relationship. Had it all been a lie? The flash, the moment during the movie night, the quick, unreadable glance between Sharon and Carol. It wasn't about the movie, not really. It had been a shared secret, a silent conspiracy. Carol must have known. All this time, they had been laughing at his kitchen table, playing cards, while this deception festered beneath the surface. His blood ran cold. Sharon, her voice growing stronger, a hint of defiance entering it, added, "It wasn't just about Frank, Dale. It was about me, about feeling alive again. I needed something." Needed something? Dale finally found his voice, a raw, choked sound. "What about Annie? What about our daughter? How could you do this to her? To us?" The image of Annie sleeping soundly in her crib flashed in his mind, innocent and utterly dependent. This betrayal wasn't just against him. It was against their whole fragile future. She started to cry harder then, loud, gasping sobs. I didn't, I didn't think about Annie. Not then. I just wanted to feel something for myself for once." The humiliation was a burning tide rising up his throat. It was Brenda again, but worse. This time it wasn't just a girlfriend. It was his wife, his friend, his whole carefully constructed world crumbling around him. The trust was not just broken, it was shattered, ground into dust. He felt exposed, foolish, a cuckold in his own home. "I want to know everything," Dale demanded, his voice low, steady, despite the tremor in his hands. "Every detail, every lie. I want to know exactly how deep this goes." He needed to understand the full scope of their deception, to see the edges of this new, terrifying reality. The confession hung in the air, a physical weight in the small kitchen. Dale looked at Sharon, really looked at her, and found he couldn't see the woman he married. Her tear-streaked face, her whispered apologies, they were foreign to him. His world, which he'd spent years carefully rebuilding after Brenda, felt shattered once more. But this time the pieces were smaller, sharper, and utterly tainted. This was Brenda all over again. Only worse because it involved Frank, a man he had called a friend, a man he had trusted. The thought of Frank, his hand on Sharon, their shared secrets, burned through him. It wasn't just Sharon's betrayal, it was Frank's too, a double-edged sword, twisting in the gut. How many times had they sat across from them, shared meals, laughed at card games, while this secret festered, a poison under the surface? The indignity of it, the cold calculation, was almost unbearable. His first instinct was to walk out, to pack a bag and just leave. But then the image of Annie, her innocent, trusting face, flashed in his mind. He couldn't. Not yet. She was too young to understand, too fragile to bear the brunt of his rage. She was his one true anchor, the reason he had tried so hard to build a stable life. The shame and rage built within him. How would he confront Frank? How would he even look at Carol? The quiet town, the small community where everyone knew everyone. This secret would tear through it like wildfire. He imagined the whispers, the knowing glances. It was a humiliation he didn't know if he could live with. Sharon kept trying to talk, her voice hoarse with tears, offering apologies, explanations about loneliness, about feeling neglected. But her words felt hollow, like sounds echoing in an empty room. He was numb, the pain too deep to be soothed by any easy words. Her remorse, genuine as it might be, did not erase the fact of her deceit, the deliberate choice she had made, twice. He knew with a certainty that chilled him to the bone, that he couldn't let this lie remain hidden. Not just for revenge, though a dark part of him craved that, but for the truth. For the integrity of what little he had left. They needed to face what they had done. All of them. The weight of it pressed down on him through sleepless nights. He pictured Frank and Sharon together, in Florida, in Colorado. The intimate details Sharon had reluctantly spilled, the quiet descriptions of their time together, replayed in his mind, vivid and tormenting. He saw Frank's easy smile, Carol's gentle eyes, and the fury inside him simmered, a constant low burn. He needed to talk to someone. Not a lawyer yet, not the police, but someone who knew him, someone who could understand the depth of this wound. He called Beth late one night, after Annie was fed and asleep, after Sharon had cried herself to sleep in the guest room. "Beth," he said, his voice raw, "I need to tell you something." He laid it all out, the slow unraveling, the credit card statements, Sharon's confession. Beth listened, silent, until he finished. Then her reaction was a mixture of stunned disbelief and righteous anger. "Dale, I can't believe it," she finally said, her voice tight. "Frank? That quiet, unassuming Frank? And Carol, she knew? Oh, Dale, this is awful. You poor thing. What about Annie?" Her concern for his daughter was immediate and genuine. "I don't know," Dale admitted, his voice cracking. I don't know what to do." "You have to protect Annie, Dale," Beth urged. "That's the most important thing. And you deserve honesty. You need to make them face it. All of them." Her words, though painful, were a balm, a lifeline in the chaos. Dale began to plan. He wouldn't rush in blindly. He would choose his words carefully, dissecting their actions, leaving them nowhere to hide. He researched legal options online, divorce laws, custody arrangements, feeling a desperate need for control over at least some aspect of his life. He found himself questioning everything, even his own feelings. Had he ever truly loved Sharon, or had their marriage been a convenient escape from loneliness, a practical arrangement born of mutual hurt? The answer, he realized, was more complicated than he cared to admit. The tension in Dale's living room was thick enough to cut with a knife. He had called Frank and Carol, asking them to come over, explaining it was a serious family matter that needed to be discussed. They arrived looking confused but vaguely concerned, sitting on the floral couch where Dale and Sharon usually sat. Dale and Sharon occupied the armchairs, Sharon pale and rigid beside him. The air was heavy, charged with unspoken knowledge. Dale didn't waste time. He pulled out the credit card statement, the restaurant receipt, the B&B bill. His voice was steady, flat, betraying none of the turmoil inside him. "Sharon has something to tell you, Frank. And Carol, about these trips to Florida and Colorado." He gestured to the papers on the coffee table. Sharon, her eyes downcast, her voice barely a whisper, repeated her confession, detailing the affair, the conventions, the stolen moments. Frank's face, usually so open and friendly, went slack, then a deep crimson. Carol, initially bewildered, slowly turned to look at Frank, her expression shifting from confusion to dawning horror. "What is this, Sharon?" Frank stammered, his eyes darting to Dale, then back to Sharon. "A joke?" "No joke, Frank," Dale interjected, his voice firm. "We have the receipts. Sharon has told me everything." He laid out the documents, pushing them across the coffee table. "Romantic dinners for two, Frank. A weekend getaway. That's not a moment of weakness you had, is it? That's planning. That's a pattern." Frank, seeing the evidence, tried to backtrack, to minimize. It was a mistake, Dale, just a few times. We weren't thinking. A moment of weakness, I swear." His eyes pleaded, first with Dale, then with Sharon. But Carol wasn't listening to Frank's excuses. She was looking at the receipts, then at Sharon, then back at Frank, her face crumbling. Her disbelief curdled into fury. "A moment of weakness?" she shrieked, her voice cracking. "Two conventions? A B? You did this with my friend? With my husband?" Her hands balled into fists, and she turned on Frank, hitting his arm repeatedly. Small, ineffectual blows of pure rage. "You lying bastard! How could you?" The room exploded. Accusations flew. Truths were hurled like stones. Carol's sobs, Frank's desperate attempts at damage control, Sharon's quiet tears. Dale stood firm, a cold observer in the wreckage. He made sure they understood. "This isn't just a mistake, Frank. This destroyed everything. Our friendship, the trust. It's why I am." News of the affair spread through their close-knit Midwestern community with astonishing speed. Whispers in the grocery aisles, hushed conversations over fence posts, knowing glances at church. Suddenly, both couples were pariahs. Invitations stopped coming. Old friends looked away when they passed on the street. Frank's reputation at the plant, once solid, began to suffer. His easygoing nature was replaced by a sullen defensiveness. Carol, who had always been a cheerful, outgoing woman, retreated into herself, struggling with the public shame and the raw wound of her husband's and friends' betrayal. Dale and Sharon's marriage, now publicly exposed, hung by a thread, stretched taut and fraying. They still shared the house, still went through the motions for Annie, but the silence between them was vast, filled with unsaid words and irreparable damage. Annie, though too young to comprehend the intricate web of lies and heartbreak, sensed the profound shift. She would look from Dale's grim face to Sharon's withdrawn one, her small brows furrowed with unspoken confusion. A grim satisfaction settled in Dale's chest. The truth was out. The lies were exposed. But it offered little comfort to his own broken heart. His quiet life now a public spectacle of humiliation. The bitter taste of victory was still just bitterness. The aftermath was not a swift, clean ending, but a slow, agonizing unraveling that left deep scars on everyone involved. Frank and Carol's marriage, already strained, simply collapsed. The initial shock, the public humiliation, Carol's raw fury, it was too much to bear. Frank moved out of their house within weeks, taking a small apartment across town. The plant, sensing the uncomfortable tension and the whispers, eventually nudged him out of his supervisory position, forcing him into a less visible role or the unspoken option of leaving town entirely. He chose the lesser role, a ghost in the hallways he once commanded. Carol, heartbroken and publicly exposed, retreated from most social circles. She found work at the library, a quieter place where she could mostly avoid the pitying glances and hushed conversations. Rebuilding her life felt like picking up shattered glass with bare hands. Dale and Sharon remained. For Annie, they told themselves, for the semblance of a family. But the trust, once broken, remained shattered. It was a daily tightrope walk, navigating the minefield of unspoken resentments and forced normalcy. Dale found himself constantly searching her face for signs, for the ghost of Frank, for the echoes of her deceit. Every touch felt tainted. Every shared moment, even with Annie, was tinged with the knowledge of what she had done, what he now carried. Forgiveness was a word he knew, but its meaning felt distant, unattainable. He watched Sharon, who lived with a visible weight of guilt, trying to earn back a respect she had willingly thrown away. She was quieter, more attentive, but it was like trying to mend a cracked plate. The lines were always there, visible and unyielding. He often found his thoughts drifting back to Brenda, to the young soldier he had been, to the gut-wrenching pain of that first betrayal. The parallel was stark, colder now with the added layer of Frank's treachery. He realized then that the price everyone had paid was far greater than a fleeting pleasure. It was the demolition of lives, the erosion of innocence, the bitter truth that the small comforts they had built upon were fragile, easily broken. The community gossip, as all gossip eventually does, faded. The initial uproar gave way to a dull hum, replaced by newer scandals, but the memory lingered. It affected the way people interacted with them, the way doors seemed to close just a little faster, the way conversations died when they approached. They were the couple who had lived through it, the family touched by the scandal. Dale and Sharon continued on, a functional unit. They raised Annie, provided for her, maintained a facade of a normal life. But the love that had once been a quiet, steady presence was forever tinged with sorrow, with the shadow of what could have been. It was a quieter kind of love now, one born more of shared history and necessity than passion or unblemished trust. He stood by Annie's window one evening watching her sleep, her small chest rising and falling with innocent regularity. Some wounds, he understood, never fully heal. They just scar over, becoming a part of the landscape of who you are. Life, in its quiet, persistent way, kept moving forward, demanding its due, demanding that you pick yourself up, even when you felt irrevocably broken. He found a quiet resolve in the dim light of her room, understanding the complex, often painful, nature of human connection and morality in the heartland. There were no easy answers, no clean endings, just the ongoing, sometimes brutal, truth of existence.